But we begin our show today by talking about what's happening in Provo, Utah. Throughout the week, if you've been with us on our streaming platform, we have been listening in quite a bit to the preliminary hearing for Tyler Robinson. Today is day 5 of 5, the day that the hearing is expected to kind of wrap up. And this is a hearing that will determine the next steps in the case of Tyler Robinson, who, of course, is charged with aggravated murder in the shooting death of Charlie Kirk. And so joining us live now to help us make sense of everything that has happened in court this week and what happens next, pleased to be joined by Judge Tarlika Nunez-Navarro, who is the Dean of the St. Thomas College of Law, joining us live in our streaming studio here today. Judge, thank you so much for taking the time and for joining us here on Florida Live today.
Thank you for having me.
So I first want to get your take. It was interesting to hear the judge say today that despite the hearing wrapping up, that he's not going to make a decision on probable cause here until September at the earliest. Why would that be?
Well, in a case like this, that's prudent on the judge to take his time. I believe also the prosecutor and the defense are going to submit written argument prior to the oral argument that will happen on September 1st. And then they will come in, they will argue in front of the judge, and the judge will probably take his time in ruling and make sure that everything is correct and detailed accordingly. This is a death penalty case, and a death penalty case is scrutinized at the highest level. So he has to make sure that all his T's are crossed and his I's are dotted.
Yeah, it seems like he has been very careful to make sure that everything is done very carefully, everything is done by the book, kind of knowing that at some point they'll come looking at everything that has happened.
Yes, you can tell in his rulings all week. He's been very thorough and prepared. I've been quite impressed with his patience level for allowing the amount of arguments that we have seen. This is a very, very high level scrutinized case, and so everything that he does will be looked through very thoroughly.
Is that abnormal or is that normal for a judge in a case like this to say, I'm over the next few weeks, we'll look at this more and we'll make my decision on whether there's probable cause or not?
No, it's fairly normal for a case like this for him to take his time. You've seen it time and time again here in Orlando. We've had our high profile cases as well, and the judges here also do take their time in cases like this. You don't want to have to retry a death penalty case. It costs a ton of money to the taxpayers.
I also want to get your take, because there has been, again, all in the lead up, the weeks and months leading up to this preliminary hearing, so much conversation and so many motions by the defense about public access to this, about media access for this. We know Charlie Kirk has said she wants everything public. The defense has fought tooth and nail, doing it as much as they can to make sure nothing essentially would be public when it comes to the evidence and the exhibits in this. We've seen the judge kind of allow some things, not allow some things. Apparently there was something yesterday that was shown for a few seconds that shouldn't have, and so the judge, as we talked about earlier, decided today no exhibits would be shown. What do you make of what we're seeing when it comes to kind of the public access, the media access to what we're seeing of the evidence in this preliminary hearing?
Well, this really is a balancing act for the judge. He has several competing interests that he has to take into account, constitutional safeguards as well. So the Kirk family certainly has the victim rights under the Constitution to hear the evidence that is presented in this case, as well as the defendant has his constitutional safeguards and rights to have a fair and impartial jury. And so the judge has to make sure that he doesn't let out too much so that a jury is not able to be picked in this case. And of course, we also have the public right, a public right to access to the court and access to know what's going on. And then you have all the conspiracy theories that we need to make sure that we're not fueling that as well, because public trust in the judiciary is paramount.
That's got to be a tough spot the judge finds him in, trying to make sure that everything, that you satisfy kind of all of those requirements, all of those competing interests.
Yes, I am not envious of this judge. I would not want to be sitting on this case.
So just kind of walk us through what happens next. Obviously, this is an important kind of procedural step here because the judge will have a decision as to whether or not there's probable cause and whether this case moves forward. Talk to us about the kind of role that this process plays in the larger legal procedure.
All right, so this is the first hurdle for the prosecution to get over, which is to establish probable cause that a crime was committed and that Tyler Robinson committed that crime. Once probable cause is found, then the judge will rule accordingly and allow it to proceed to trial. Once it proceeds to trial and gets a docket scheduled, then of course we start discovery, we start preliminary motions, defense will be filing their motions to suppress, expert witnesses will be listed, depending on Utah and the deposition rights, that depositions will be held, and then it will then proceed to an actual trial. So judging on how long it took to get this preliminary hearing done, how long the preliminary hearing took, and what we have seen the last 5 days, I would not predict this case would be going to trial before the next 2 years.
Wow. And if we have thought that we have seen a lot of back and forth between, the defense and the prosecution in this, because we have, them really kind of going head to head on some things, potential, contempt for the prosecutors over some comments that they had made. If we thought we had seen a lot in the lead up to this preliminary hearing, what you're saying is that's just the start of what we could see over the next couple of years.
Yeah, this is only the beginning. The prosecutor has to really be mindful on what they're saying and what they're doing with the media in this case, because the judge is going to be very cautious, and as he should. And so I think this is only the beginning of what we will see over the next course of the next probably 16 to 24 months.
So what we have talked about some of the legal issues that have come up in the lead up to this. What do you think are some of the legal issues that are really going to shape where this case goes from here?
Well, the defense is essentially getting a preview into what this case is going to disclose, what the prosecutor's hand is, if you would put it that way. The defense does not have any burden at all to put on a case right now. They're just absorbing the information. And as a defense attorney, as a prior defense attorney, as a prior prosecutor, I can tell you the defense is looking for just holes. They're looking for like the ballistics and the inability to conclusively determine that that bullet in fact came from that rifle. So any opening that they have, they will harp on, and right now they're just getting a preview into that.
So what will you be watching for, given your extensive experience in this? I'm sure you watch how these things play out a lot differently than lay people like us. So what will you kind of be watching for as we continue to watch this process play out?
Well, I mean, this is fairly usual, due course, procedural. Everyone's making obviously a big deal about how much argument is allowed, but like I said, the judge is being prudent in his assessment of this case, and I will be watching from the sidelines. I think he's doing a very good job. The prosecutor, like I said, has to be extremely mindful of the way they handle this case, especially in the media, and most importantly, how are they going to get a fair and impartial jury who has not seen the evidence in this case? That is going to be telling.
You've sat on the bench. You're a judge. What challenges does a case like this pose for everybody when it comes to just the intense attention that's being focused on this all across the country?
Well, of course, the logistics. I mean, to have a case like this with the media and the families and the security, that alone is a challenge just for the courthouse. And we saw it here in Orlando years back in several high-profile cases. You have to manage the people coming in and out of the courthouse. And of course, the judge and the circuit has to manage the appeal and the record. And that's why you see the judge explaining thoroughly every decision that he is making, because he is laying a record for the appellate courts.
Just the beginning of what's going to be a long process ahead. Judge Tarlika Nunez-Navarro, Dean of the St. Thomas College of Law, thank you so much for joining us here on Florida Live. Really enjoyed talking with you, and thanks for helping us make sense of everything here.
Of course. Thank you for having me.
We're going to take a quick break.